I'm Nintendo Eyes.
And I'm Sega Eyes. This is Console Wars!
Are you almost done setting it up?
Just about. One more twist and...
So what is this again?
Guy says it was to give us access to shows. Shows too risque for regular TV.
Alright, sounds awesome. Well, put something on.
Alright, ready for some illegal shows? Hold on to your butts.
We'll be back with more random people exploding after this.
Whoa! Wow! Now that's a show! I could watch that all day.
This is amazing. Let's try another channel.
And he's struggling. Can he do it?
Oh, this must be a food eating competition. What's he eating?
And he's struggling. He's almost there. Can he do it? Can he win the one-of-a-kind speedboat? And he's almost there. Can he do it? I think yes! He's done it! Congratulations, Roger. You're the new winner of Eat Your Own Hair!
Oh, gross. That was disgusting.
I'm gonna be sick. Here, let's try this.
Nutty. Vanilla. A little bit of asparagus. That's a grade A. I'd like to submit my final answer.
If he answers right, he will win a one-of-a-kind speedboat.
That is a refreshing Bud Light.
Oh, sorry, the correct answer is P.
That's cheating! It's the same thing!
We'll be back with more beer or pee after this.
Okay, I think I'm done.
Alright. Wait a minute. How would you feel about watching a show called Smash TV?
Smash TV? That's a video game.
Uh-huh.
A violent game where you have to kill lots of people in order to get money and babes.
That's right.
Oh man, I can't believe they made a show about it. And it wasn't Netflix? They're usually on top of this kind of stuff.
Should I put it on?
I love Super Smash TV growing up.
Fantastic game. For Sega Genesis.
Yeah, it was alright, but the Super Nintendo version was definitely better.
What? That's it? Are we doing this?
Oh, we're doing this. Let's compare Super Smash TV for Super Nintendo.
And Super Smash TV for Sega Genesis.
Smash TV is a 1990 arcade game that has players battle waves of enemies by using various weapons. The plot of Smash TV revolves around a futuristic game show in which players compete for various prizes as well as their lives. It took inspiration from the 1987 film The Running Man.
There were several computer versions. Console versions included the NES, Game Gear, and Master System. The versions we're looking at today were the ones released for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. Both games were incredibly similar, with some notable differences. Which one's better? Let's find out.
These games look pretty similar.
Both games have the same top-down perspective. They both have the same small sprites. They both have the same looking heroes and enemies. Even the giant-sized bosses look the same.
Even the levels look the same. They're not much really. Nothing stands out from room to room. Just plain empty rooms, soon to be covered by enemies. Other things look the same too, from the title screen to the host and his babes. These games look the same.
But there are some places where the Genesis game looks better.
Right before the level starts, on Sega, you'll notice the Smash TV logo flashing from screen to screen, and lights flashing as well. And on Super Nintendo, all of that is gone. And on this boss fight in Sega, you see all these fuzzy TV screens. And on Super Nintendo, no fuzz, just nothing. Plus, babes on Sega definitely look better than the babes on Super Nintendo. I mean, those are definitely babes. And those could be coconut shrimp?
and your game is censored.
What? No, it isn't.
Oh yeah? Well, my game shows nips.
It does?
That's right. The Sega game has nips.
Well, male nipples, but it's still nips. And no nips on Super Nintendo. Is Nintendo really afraid of corrupting the youth with male nipples?
It looks weird, that's why. Like anyone would want to see male nips anyway.
Did I hear someone talking about male nips?
No, definitely not us.
I could have swore I did.
We were talking about kale tips. Yeah, you know, tips on how to cook them. Have you tried using the oven?
That's a good tip. Oh, my mistake. I guess I'll go then. You can also boil the kale too. Will do, pastrami.
Well, regardless of those minor details, my game definitely looks better.
Let's start with the obvious, color. Side by side, you'll notice the Super Nintendo game is darker. This helps the characters pop out more. It also gives my game more of a gritty look.
And you want to talk minor details? Let's talk.
Let's check out the host and babes again. See how the babes blink and the suit sparkles on Super Nintendo? On Sega, nothing. Let's talk other details. See how the floor in this Super Nintendo level is damaged? Gives the game more of a lived-in feel. And on Sega, it's just clean. No damage, details, or nothing. And let's look at the mines. On Super Nintendo, they have some good detail and actually glow. On Sega, they're just gray circles. Overall, the levels on Super Nintendo have more detail and better use of color. This also applies to the bosses too. See how this one boss on Super Nintendo freaks out every time you attack him? And on Sega, he's just perturbed. Plus, bosses and characters are bigger on Super Nintendo.
It's no contest, really.
With better use of color, more details, better looking levels and characters, best graphics go to Super Nintendo.
Our presentation
Is also very similar.
Both games start off with the same looking title screens and story. Every level starts with characters appearing before the host and the live studio audience. And between levels, you have the same looking screens that add up your scores.
The HUD during gameplay is similar too. You have your score with ammo below. Then you have your number of lives. Nice and simple. And when you get a prize, it comes with a message and a picture. And every room you enter has a title, like you're in a movie. And of course, you see the host and babes occasionally.
But that's where the similarities end. Because my game has a little something to put it over the top.
Noticed any differences in the text on Super Nintendo and Sega? That's right, the Super Nintendo text flashes while the Sega text stays one boring color. This happens in the intro, between stages, and in the ending, which also comes with a babe. No babe in Sega's ending.
flashes. Nobody cares about flashes. Let's talk about details.
Let's talk about when you go between rooms. In Sega, when you go between rooms, you see what looks like people working for a TV studio. It's not much, but it reminds you that you're on a TV show. And on Super Nintendo, you don't see that. Only in certain rooms, but never between them. It's a nice touch like that that gives my game better presentation.
Are you kidding me? My presentation is much better than yours.
Look how lame your player select screen is. Talk about the bare minimum.
You want bare minimum? Look at your game. You don't even have the Smash TV logo.
So, my top score looks cooler than yours with flashing text. Yours is so boring.
It may look boring, but at least I have the developers listed.
I still say flashing text is better.
And I say TV execs between the levels is better.
Does this mean tie?
With many similarities in the layout.
And only minor differences.
Presentation is a tie.
We have some similar songs.
But my quality is better. You can't deny that quality.
That's not much better. And besides, my other tunes are definitely better than yours.
We'll see about that.
My music's more melodic and memorable.
And my music's faster and more intense.
I definitely like mine better.
And I like mine better.
This music talk is gonna get us nowhere. Let's talk about the real difference. Sound effects.
Specifically, voiceovers. Both games have voiceovers, but the Super Nintendo quality is far superior.
Good luck. You'll need it. Good luck. You'll need it. Big money. Big prizes. I love it. Big money. Big prizes. I love it.
Plus, I don't think they say this classic line in Sega.
I'd buy that for $1.
And if that's not enough, my game also has more sound effects.
In the Super Nintendo game, you hear the player say more things when he gets items.
Yeah. Woo. Let's go.
He's a little more quiet in the Sega game. You also hear the crowd more in Super Nintendo, like when you die. When you die in the Sega game, you don't hear them. Also, during the total score, you hear the crowd cheer in Super Nintendo. Again, nothing on Sega. I almost feel sad for the player.
There's just no denying that Super Nintendo sound.
With better instrumentation, more memorable melodies, better quality voiceovers, and more sound effects. Best sound goes to Super Nintendo.
I'd buy that for $1.
Looks like our gameplay
Is very similar.
Both games are a top-down shooter. You're in the futuristic 1999 game show where you move from room to room and take on hordes of enemies. You're constantly moving and killing people, because one hit and you die. There are various weapons, power-ups, and prizes you can collect too. And each level ends with a massive boss fight. The game is only 3 levels, but the number of rooms and enemies makes it last long. And this game can be played with 1 or 2 players.
But that's where the similarities end. Let's talk controls.
The original arcade game was played with dual sticks. Since both controllers only have one D-pad, this makes the transition to consoles a bit tricky. Luckily, the Super Nintendo controller has 4 face buttons. This actually acts as a second D-pad. So, X is up, A is right, B is down, and Y is left. Holding down 2 face buttons lets you shoot at an angle. It's not perfect, but it works surprisingly well. But the Genesis controller, with only 3 buttons, doesn't work like that. And no, the 6-button controller doesn't change anything. So on the Genesis, since it can't work like a D-pad, you have 1 button to shoot in the direction you're facing, 1 to shoot in the opposite direction, and 1 button to lock you in place. This control scheme is nowhere near as good as the Super Nintendo's.
What's wrong with my controls?
Are you kidding? Everything.
In this game, you're constantly running away from enemies to avoid getting hit. The Super Nintendo game lets you run away and it makes it easy to aim while doing so. The aiming in Sega is rough. You can only aim in the direction you're running, or its opposite. That's only 2 directions out of 8. In a game where enemies are constantly coming at you from every direction, that's not good odds. If enemies get close, you're done. Only the lock button is really useful in the Genesis game. But you need to position yourself far enough away from enemies to make it effective.
Okay, granted, that's not the best control scheme, but you're completely ignoring the fact that I can play with dual stick controls.
How?
How? 2 controllers.
Odd control scheme is easily fixed with a second controller. Now I have 1 D-pad for running and 1 for shooting. It's just as effective as the Super Nintendo controller.
No problems here.
But you need 2 controllers to do the job of 1 controller.
I thought you liked 2 different controllers, like the Switch.
Those controllers were made for one hand. The Sega controller is bulky and uncomfortable.
What's uncomfortable about this?
Even if you're cool with that, it's still flawed. I'm talking about 2 players.
If you play 2 players on Sega, you can't have 2 D-pads. You need to use those poor controls. I don't even think a multi-tap can help you since it's not listed in the options.
So my 2-player can be more unique, where I run and you shoot.
If you expect that not to ruin friendships, then I've got bad news for you. Even if you ignore the controls, my gameplay is still better than yours.
The Super Nintendo game has secret rooms. The Genesis game doesn't. The Super Nintendo has an unlockable turbo mode. The Sega game doesn't. The Super Nintendo lets you control difficulty. The Sega game doesn't.
I still got you beat. The Genesis game has the player start out with 7 lives. The Super Nintendo only has you start out with 5.
Number of lives? Let's talk about continues. The Super Nintendo game starts you off with 4 continues. The Sega Genesis game only starts you off with 1.
And if that's not enough, let's talk about the cheat codes.
The Super Nintendo game has various cheat codes. The Sega game has none. The Super Nintendo also has loads of Game Genie codes. The Sega game has, well, 2.
There's just no denying. My gameplay is better.
With a better control scheme on 1 controller, more secrets, unlockables, and cheats, best gameplay goes to Super Nintendo.
Even though both games are very similar, one is better. That game is Super Smash TV for Super Nintendo.
It has better graphics with better use of color and more details. The presentation in both games is about the same. Super Nintendo has better sound with better quality, more memorable tunes, and more sound effects. It also has better gameplay with better controls, secrets, unlockables, and more cheats. The Genesis game just falls short in most categories, but the main flaw in the Sega Genesis game is the controls. Not being able to have dual stick controls on 1 controller makes it a lot harder. It's a decent port, but not as fine-tuned as it could have been. Best Super Smash TV goes to Super Nintendo.
Man, I really thought I'd win with that 2-controller action.
Hey, I know what'll cheer you up. Let's watch some actual Smash TV.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. I'll put it on.
My name's Gunner. I'm a local bartender. I've been to jail 3 times. I think I've got what it takes to beat Smash TV, 'cause I'm mean.
Gunner will be competing for a one-of-a-kind speed boat. Yes. Okay, on your marks. Get set. Go! Okay, he's found his target and he's working himself up and now he's turning around and bending over. Yes, here he goes. And 1. And 2. And a 3. And needs to adjust himself. And here we go again. 4. And 5. Yes. We'll be back with more Smash TV, the only show where people smash TVs with their butts, after this.
That's not exactly what I expected.
Not at all. Do you want to keep watching?
Yes, I really do. I just gotta know if this guy can break that TV with his butt.
I know, I'm invested. I say he does it in under 50 smashes.
50 smashes?
Yeah.
With that flabby butt? You're on.
There he goes. 1, 2, 3.
Thanks for checking out our latest video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks to Xavior TheLycan for his donation of the 2 games. And thanks to everyone who suggested Super Smash TV. And keep those other suggestions coming. We will get to them. Also, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Console Wars goodness. Later.
Sounds good. I'm in.
It's not that kind of TV. It's a little...
That's a cat. Never seen that South Park?
It's a, like, what?